chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for Saturday, January 31st, 2015. Have Russ with us, of course. We'll try to get to calls quickly. Want to really make this a forum to answer as many questions as we possibly can with so much happening so quickly and people try and get their bearings. We'll do our best to give solid, accurate data so that people can continue to adjust their compass settings. And as I've said many times, we have to constantly take in data and adjust the lens through which we see the world to clear that lens so that we're looking without bias. We have a series of engineered winter storms continuing in the east. And it's imperative that as this weather warfare and biological warfare continues, and that's exactly what it is, while the majority of the American population still is asleep at the wheel, there's no other term for it. They refuse to wake up. They're too comfortable in their paradigm. But that is changing rapidly. People will not be able to stay in their comfort zone bubbles much longer. So as we see this chain of winter storms going back to Juneau, and I posted maps on this at the exact same time, quote-unquote, Winter Storm Juneau was happening with warm moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico and right off the Atlantic Ocean. That flashes out to snow. There's no longer, again, snow is no longer related to elevation. You're either on the cold side of the storm or the warm side. You're either on the massively chemically nucleated side or the side that the moisture is feeding in on that often has thunder showers, convective moisture that's associated with warmer weather. And now we have thunder snow constantly, something that didn't exist in the distant past. Now it's normal. So as weather warfare is waged on the East Coast at the exact same time, and I posted maps on this. I encourage people to look at the recent column of GeoEngineeringWatch.org. At the exact same time, we had records being shattered, high temperature records all over the middle part of the U.S. lower 48. Temperature records that were shattered by nearly 20 degrees. Now, I'm not saying 20 degrees above normal, but the former high temperature records were shattered by 20 degrees. Didn't see much discussion about that in the media because their goal is to create hype and headlines about cold, cold, cold on the East Coast, and it works. It works because I just deleted a comment someone tried to post on Geoengineering Watch that said, I just can't believe it's warm anywhere because it's cold where I'm at. Well, you're not looking very far past your doorstep then, and you can't really tell what's going on then. Because if that's as far as we looked, we'd all still think the world was flat. The world isn't flat. And if we're to gain credibility in our cause, we must look at the bigger picture. People in our community must understand these storms are completely engineered bottom to top. If they were not chemically nucleating, it would not be snowing almost anywhere in the lower 48 right now. So now we have Juneau, Winter Storm Carrie, and the names make it all more theatrical, and that's the goal. Winter Storm Carrie will be followed by Winter Storm Linus. And the moisture for these storms came from, guess where? The south. Again, since when do winter storms come from the south? Winter Storm Carrie and Linus, which are going on now, the moisture came right over mainland Mexico and the Gulf of California. Not the Gulf of Mexico, but the Gulf of California. This is basically monsoonal moisture. You don't have winter storms from monsoonal moisture. And the Weather Channel is spending their morning talking about rain changing over to snow. Why does rain change over to snow? Because it's being chemically nucleated. Chaos is occurring in countries around the globe. The power structure is being backed into a corner ever more by the day. In many ways, they're losing ground. And this is where it's important to remember, for all of us to remember. There are too many who think those in the power structure have it all figured out, that everything goes exactly how they've laid it out. There's a great deal of evil genius, very malevolent genius, but there are huge gaps in their thinking. They make many, many mistakes. And I don't see them as infallible as many do. They are not. That's why every single empire has failed, because their thinking has many flaws. They always overestimate their power, and in the end, the house of cards always collapses. And who do we have feeding us information? One character of particular importance and of particular propaganda in that realm, Wolf Blitzer. I'm just using him as an example. Do we really think that's his real name, Wolf Blitzer? This is a former AIPAC lobbyist that's now in the head of the CNN propaganda center. Is this an accident? Of course not. It's not an accident. And we see the kind of media that's fed through us or to us by all these sources support our troops, for example. Does our government support our troops? Really? Agent Orange, depleted uranium, making our troops sick by the hundreds of thousands in the case of depleted uranium and Gulf War syndrome, which was related to that. 185,000 troops sick, not getting care, and yet we see these commercials that come on and how wonderful it is to sign up for the military. How wonderful. You can have your limbs blown off while you're being used as cannon fodder for the power structure. People need to wake up. And then we have the Wounded Warriors commercials. And make no mistake, I grieve for our soldiers. I grieve. And unlike most people who just slap a sticker on their bumper that says support our troops, I actually worked with volunteering, rehabbing NAM vets because it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart to see these broken men. One in particular I spent a considerable amount of time with who stepped on a landmine 2 days before his tour of duty was over, and he was a twisted wreck of a man, but with a huge heart. And I wept many times as I worked with this man. And I salute our troops, but I want them to wake up. I want them to wake up and understand what they're being used for. And when we see, again, these Wounded Warriors commercials, if what they did, what they were being used for, I should say, I don't doubt their motives, but what they were being used for was simply cannon fodder for the power structure. And our military needs to wake up to this. Who are the terrorists really? When we see CNN going on for days and days and days about one or two people that ISIL might kill, ISIL who is spawned and armed by our own government, and yet no mention of the hundreds of innocent civilians killed by the U.S. drone execution program, no mention whatsoever. No mention of the millions killed directly or indirectly by indiscriminate bombing in Vietnam or the Balkans or any one of the other 50 countries that the U.S. has invaded in the last 50 years. No, we hear about countries like Iran and what a threat they are. In 200 years, Iran has invaded exactly no one. In 50 years, the U.S. has invaded or interfered with 50 countries. Who's the terrorist? Who is really the terrorist here? I don't agree with obviously the Muslim fundamentalists are wrong. They're a huge problem. I don't argue that. But that's not the whole Muslim community by any means. And again, is it okay? Does that make it okay for countries that can drop bombs from 20 or 30,000 feet where you don't have to see the blown off limbs and arms? Somehow that's okay? And the carnage there is much, much bigger? We need to somehow undo the brainwashing of the American public, and they'll have no choice. The climate situation alone is why I'm focused on this issue. Climate engineering and the unraveling of the climate, being fueled by climate engineering, is something that cannot be ignored, because if the public could, it would ignore everything as long as it possibly can. So as the climate continues to unravel, as the weather warfare and biological warfare continues at an all-out pace, the poisoning of all life on the planet, again, by the very government who makes theater out of one or two civilians being killed, which is horribly wrong. I'm not arguing this. It's horribly wrong, these civilians that are being sacrificed. But why does the media make such theater out of it? Isn't that what fuels that sort of thing in the first place, with an organization that, again, was spawned by our own government, with John McCain standing with their leaders, and they make this theater out of it, while at the very same time people who buy into that theater are being poisoned day in, day out by the very same government that they're sympathizing with for other reasons, fed by propaganda. Again, people must wake up. And we do not have a lot of time. And for those activists, and I know there are many who are frustrated with their family members, their friends, who do not want to look at the truth, I hope people don't lose heart, because you are planting seeds that will be forced to sprout very soon. There will be no other choice. The rapidity with which the unraveling is occurring and the desperation with which the climate engineers are trying to hide what they have actually created and helped fuel, not the only cause, and this is another issue, again, I want people in our community to understand, any form of alteration of the planet is geoengineering. Any form, whether it's cutting down forests or pumping 100 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere a day, all of that is a form of geoengineering. How can it not be? So we need to stop thinking in this or that terms and realize it's a big equation. But back to climate engineering, if we could expose this one issue, would catalyze populations around the globe. The power structure would fall if we could expose this one issue. And I don't underestimate the danger of the power structure being exposed. They will be more dangerous than ever. At any point in time, they could change the mix and we're all done. But if we continue on this path, we're all done anyway. Why wouldn't we stand and fight? If you're being marched into the gas chamber, why wouldn't you stand and make your voice heard and try to turn the direction of that ship? We must all try to do that. So Russ, you mentioned some health issues that you're going through right now, but sounds like you're holding your own. I'm hearing from a lot of people that are sick, and in general, if they're not with a specific ailment, they just don't feel well. How can we when we're exposed to this every single day?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, for me, I have inflammation from this. When the air gets very mild, it all goes away within minutes. And when it gets really, really potent, as it has been for most of this early afternoon today in Philadelphia, it's very, very painful. I hear from hundreds of people who have the same issue that I do. And so I'm definitely not alone. There's a lot of people who have inflammation from this. And God only knows what other damage, long-term damage, is being done to the body.
we don't know. We can't know. Again, you can never quantify the overall damage done by climate engineering around the globe. I mean, it would fill volumes to try to even begin to quantify it. It's imperative. I just put a post up about Lord Monckton, and he's one in the category of Tim Ball, of John Coleman, founder of the Weather Channel. I'm encouraging people, again, investigate that. Look at the links in that post. Understand that when people in our own community post data from individuals like Monckton, like Tim Ball, like John Coleman, you are actually hurting our cause. Research these people, all three of whom are ardent deniers of the climate engineering issue. Look at the videos and consider why anybody in our community would post data from people like this. It's completely counterproductive to our cause. None of these individuals would tell the truth if their lives depended on it. They would not. They're paid liars. That's all they are. It's important people in our community stand on solid facts and look at the bigger picture and do not run a particular direction because of a particular statement from a particular person who has no credibility, zero. So again, I hope people examine that particular link, investigate the links within the links of what was posted today so that you have a bigger, better, and more accurate, solid understanding of the bigger picture. Russ, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. Why don't you give the number to the call-ins right now, and then we'll take as much as we can, and we'll continue our dialogue.
Absolutely. For those who want to call in, please call 718-717-8296. We really want to speak with you. We want to hear your questions, so please don't hesitate to call. The number, once again, is 718-717-8296. And Dane, have you ever heard that quote by Kissinger? It reminded me of this quote when you were talking about how the U.S. treats their military men. I feel the same way you do. My heart goes out to these people. These individuals are being abused. They're being vaccinated with hundreds of vaccines. They don't even know what is in them. And then they come back and they have mycoplasmic infections and all kinds of exotic issues. And Kissinger said, as people are probably familiar with this quote, military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. And we saw in C-SPAN Kissinger getting protested by some activists. Did you see that?
I did. And this is where the American population and their blind patriotism toward a government who does not give a damn about them, patriotism toward the service of our brothers and sisters in the military, or regard for them, is appropriate. But I would also say at the same time, our brothers and sisters in the military need to wake up. If they are participating, and they are, in the weather warfare and biological warfare assault on their own populations, that's not excusable. It's absolutely not excusable. And whatever motive brought them into the military, if they're participating in that, that's not okay. And I would not put those individuals who are participating in that in the same category as those who went to Vietnam or went to other places to try to fight what was perceived as their enemy. There is no rationalization of perceiving your own population as an enemy. If that's the place you're in, it's not excusable. So, again, I hope others in our military hold accountable their comrades who are participating in the aerosol spraying. So we're at a point where the information is available, and those in our military need to wake up because they're poisoning their own population, period. And all those contractors and people who are supplying these materials and everybody involved that is knowingly involved, and there really is no excuse for not knowing at this point. Once the public knows, I believe they will hold such people accountable, as we've stated before, in Nuremberg-style trials. That's why the power structure is struggling so desperately to hide this issue, because this is the issue that would overturn reality.
And Dane, this includes weathermen who are lying, doesn't it?
It does.
Includes disinformationalists who are participating in lying to the public, making them think that this stuff is harmless.
It does. And we need, in order to hold those people accountable and put them on notice that we know they're lying, we need people to participate in that. Many people, if there's somebody who's posted disinformation, like a TV station that just posted some astonishing, clearly non-commercial spray trails in the sky, I don't think very many people from the activist community actually went and made their voice heard, or at least if they did, it didn't get posted. But I believe most didn't go. People need to participate. Whatever other time people are spending in other arenas that are unnecessary, we need everybody on deck in this fight if we're to have any chance. We need people participating, period. So it's up to all of us to join into this. I wanted to mention a little more about Wolf Blitzer, and I'm just using him for an example. But here's somebody who was a lobbyist for AIPAC for a very long time, and this is the type of person that's pulled into. I'm not picking on AIPAC in particular, though they are the largest lobby in Washington by all accounts. So who's really running the media? How can somebody like that be considered a journalist when they're a former lobbyist? It's a total contradiction, and this is what we have in the media. And other polarizing figures that are put in, like I mentioned before, Al Sharpton. What in the world is he doing in there as a news commentator? How much more polarizing could he be? And I don't give a damn what color somebody is. I could care less. It makes no difference to me. We have other people in the news or commentating that shouldn't be there either. What about all these generals for CNN? How unbiased can they be? Total war hawk generals who are the only commentators we see. In fact, in the lead up to the Iraq War, here's a statistic of fun facts. Of 400 commentators on the lead up to the Iraq War that were allowed time on CNN, 396 of them were pro-war. 396. Imagine that. Does that seem in any sense objective? Before the Iraq War started, there was a candlelight vigil in Northern California, which I attended, and I purchased at my own expense 2 cases of a film called Hidden Wars of Desert Storm, done by a filmmaker named Gerard Ungerman, French filmmaker whom I know personally. It's a personal friend. So I had 200 DVDs, 2 cases. And at this candlelight vigil, before the start of the second Iraq War, I attended, and in the middle of this vigil on a large bridge in Northern California, I was handing out these DVDs, being photographed from every angle by 3 clearly undercover officers. And I asked one of them why he felt I was a threat. He couldn't answer, wouldn't answer, but yet they continued to photograph me. And I continued to hand out the DVDs. Hidden Wars of Desert Storm is about the depleted uranium that our own government used on our own troops. Now, how is that being unpatriotic? I care about our troops. And after that time, when I tried to cross Shasta Dam, which is used as a road for people who live on the other side, this is the second biggest dam in America, with a resident who normally passes back and forth freely, I was not allowed to go across, not initially. We had to go to another room and be investigated, and all this because, I suppose, I was handing out DVDs, and I wouldn't stop because I was being photographed. Why would I stop? I'm not doing anything wrong. This is the country we live in, with people who enforce, cowards who enforce whatever tyranny the power structure hands down, and other more passive cowards who simply don't want to look at the truth, don't want to acknowledge it, don't want to interrupt their golf game or their football game. Those are cowards. And we need to continue planting seeds again with those who are willing to wake up, so that once those cowards are forced to face reality, when there's no more food on the shelf, when the climate won't produce food anymore because it's too badly damaged, when they're forced to face reality, at least they'll know how they got there. But it's up to us all to continue trying to sow seeds. So, Russ, I know you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, some of the income, I've seen excerpts from a film called Iraq for Sale. Absolutely astonishing. Halliburton and KBR throwing perfectly good equipment into the fire, burning trucks, destroying equipment, because they get all reimbursed for this. The more they burn, the more they destroy, the more they get reimbursed, because they have an open checkbook for based on government funding of the war.
Let me shed a few more details on exactly what you said. Here's exactly what happened. I'm very familiar with the film. I've handed out hundreds of those films as well, and they were pushing vehicles into that fire, burning them, which is horrible for the atmosphere as well, obviously, but because they didn't come with all the accessories they wanted. So they would just burn those vehicles. They were paying $3,000 a month in 3-year leases for vehicles that only cost $40,000 to begin with. This is a giant free-for-all, a giant orgy of greed, corruption, quest for power, pallets of money that went to Iraq. $20 billion by some estimates. 200 pallets of printed bills to Iraq that disappeared. It just disappeared. And those who print the money think somehow their ability to print money will always salvage them, but in fact, it will sink the entire planet and everything that lives on this planet. So, if you get a call, Russ, holler. I'm ready to.
We do have a question from the chat room.
Yep.
Anybody wants to call in? By the way, we are taking calls early today, so the number is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Please feel free to call in any time. Somebody in the chat room wanted to know what advice you can give for ensuring the water and soil tests we get are accurate. For example, do you have advice on choosing a specific lab?
First, soil tests will not help our cause, because you cannot prove, unless you have a baseline, which would be uncommon, that will, without any ambiguity, prove what the soil composition was in the first place. You must rely on precipitation tests. On the labs, the lab that we have relied on, basic lab in Northern California, I have one test back, and I believe the biologist Francis Mangels has a test back that we know were not accurate. There's a new lab owner, and he has told some clientele that we should all expect to find aluminum in everything. The old owner didn't say that. So I don't know that lab is reliable anymore. But you must rely on precipitation tests. That can be snow or rain. I would not tell a lab why you're testing. That's a mistake. Many labs simply don't want in the middle of this controversy. It's not necessarily that there's some control coming from some higher place. They just don't want in the middle of this issue. We had a lab in Southern California. Morgan Carey, Mariah's older brother, is a good personal friend. He went to a lab near a Boeing plant in Southern California with a sample, talked to the lab owner, and went over everything, why he was testing. That test came back in Dane, undetectable. We took a duplicate sample to another lab, lots of metals in the range. So that test was simply scrubbed because that lab owner didn't want the middle. Near a Boeing plant, Boeing's certainly involved with these programs, so don't tell them why. Just say it's a well test, and we'll try to locate some more credible labs. But right now, we're searching a bit on that question.
It's interesting. We were our company was my small business was doing some lab tests for an unrelated purpose, and we had recently found that the lab we were using had a new owner, and it's amazing the difference in their willingness to work with us, their willingness to do tests. There was a complete attitude change, and it seems like more and more people are running into new owners of labs. Is this the case?
Well, that's an interesting point. Again, that's what's happened here in Northern California. And the former owner died prematurely. He was in his mid-60s and quite healthy, and I don't know the circumstances. I don't claim to know there was anything nefarious with that, but exactly that change happened here. We're seeing other labs, like national labs, probably the biggest in the country, have radically raised their MDLs, their minimum detection levels. So you have to find a shovel load of metal in the test before they'll even show that. So it's going to be an ongoing problem, and this is just one more way they'll try to cover things up. How did they cover up the nuclear fallout, the radiation that's coming down? They just shut down the testing on the West Coast. They raised the quote-unquote safe levels. What about the UV issue? How do you hide UVB? It's 1,000% higher. That's 10 times higher than what we're being told. You simply run all the data through a central quote processing center that puts out a reading that has no basis in reality or fact, and that's how they control it. So again, their degree to control information is truly astounding. And let's look at 9/11 again one more time. Most people do not even know a third building collapsed. How can you possibly hide that? Because they simply took down any footage of it after the first day. They don't talk about it. They didn't address it in the 9/11 Commission report. Think about that. How do you have the 9/11 Commission report, huge book, not a single sentence on a 50-story steel structure, high-rise, that collapsed, never got hit by anything, collapsed in 7 seconds? How do you hide that? So when people say that, how do we debunk the debunkers? Because the debunkers are saying such and such. How do we debunk that? If people stop believing what they see with their own eyes, there's a Chinese proverb, if you will. A fool believes what he thinks, a wise man what he sees. If we have film footage of this happening, and we can see grid patterns one day and nothing the next, we can see these trails being turned on and off, nozzles visible. If that's not enough to overturn whatever disinformation person says, then we're truly doomed. Same with 9/11. If people can't look at that building coming down, especially Building 7, and realize that we have been lied to horrifically. We have 2,200 architects and engineers right now, by the way, putting their careers and their lives on the line, telling us the official story is nonsense. How could it not be nonsense? How could a building collapse because of some couches and chairs burning in the first floor? And that's what we're told. That's exactly what we're told. So the bottom line is, if we can't use our sense of reason to immediately refute total disinformation, and we're not confident enough to stand on our own sense of reason, we don't have any chance. So I encourage everybody, when their family, when their friends says this is nonsense, stand your ground. Confidently stand your ground. Just because someone says day is night, black is white, and up is down, doesn't mean we go along with that or that we're timid about refuting that. Stand your ground with total confidence. Yes.
Yeah.
There's no other. Again, there's no other alternative. And I hope people find their courage in standing that ground with family, friends, or anybody else.
And for people who, a lot of people in the world still don't know how the world really works. And if you're an industrialist and you have large holdings, you own companies, you own corporations, you manufacture bearings for jet engines, you do all kinds of things, and you're very successful. One of the first things you want to do is control information, because you don't want any news or information coming out about your industry that is going to be against the public interest. And you don't want the public to find out that you're polluting rivers or polluting the atmosphere or that you're cheating your employees or whatever. You want to maintain a reputation. So one thing that people are beginning to catch on to, and I think we need to spread the word, is that mainstream media has been bought out by the industrial complex, by the industrialists, for the control of information.
So have universities, so has the entire system from bottom to top. Agencies, state governments, local governments, all of it runs back to the money printing machines. To put things into perspective right now, the global economy, which was nothing more than a card house ever, is collapsing as we speak. I encourage people to go to this site. If you just Google, I said it before, but this is a very good one-stop shop for unbiased data. Rice Farmer. Just Google Rice Farmer, and you'll see ricefarmer.blogspot.com. But if you just Google Rice Farmer, it's the top thing on the list. Go through the headlines there, and let me read a few right now. As of today, global alert, Baltic dry index plummets to 28-year low. What's the Baltic dry index? That's the most untarnished indicator of economic growth, which is a fallacy, on the planet. That's all goods that ship over the ocean. Plummets to 28-year lows. Why? Because nothing is shipping. It's all a card house. It's a snake eating its own tail. Let me read another headline. Commodity prices collapse to lowest in 12 years. Another headline, the Mexican peso and Brazilian real are collapsing. Another headline, weakening currencies putting developing countries at debt on risk. One more, Brazil's economy is on the verge of total collapse. Another one, Eurozone breakup threat reaches all-time high. The card house is coming down. There won't be any hiding it for much longer. Those that are in their bubbles will have them popped soon. I encourage people to go to that site, read the headlines, pick one out that you like. They don't sell anything on that site. It's non-political. It's categorized. It's easy to use. Go and take a look and understand what's going on around you. That will make you a better fighter in this battle. Even of climate engineering, all of this is connected, all of it. And they will try to hide everything as long as possible. They will try to hide the collapsing global economy, which was never sustainable. And that's what people don't want to face. This whole paradigm was never sustainable. And the faster we realize that, the faster we face it, and the faster we change direction, the more chance we'll have. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, I've told people this before. I know you've heard it, but when I worked for a smaller political party years ago, every time there was a gun rally or some kind of rally that the government didn't like, they would cut the numbers in thirds, in fifths. So if there were 5,000 people there, they would say there was 500 or maybe 1,000. Every time there was some kind of an event where they were trying to get rid of guns or trying to do something that the government liked, they would multiply the numbers. And these weren't small exaggerations. I mean, we're talking maybe there'd be 500 people there, and they'd say there were 3,500, 4,000 people. And they do that because they want the public perception to be that these causes are much more well supported, because people tend to follow those things which are already
and the reverse
supported.
is true. And the reverse is true, correct, too, right?
Absolutely.
If you have a protest they don't like and there's 10,000 people there, they'll say there was 1,000. So the exact reverse is true. No question about that.
Absolutely. And for those who want to call in, we'd love to chat with you. The number is 718-717-8296. For those who are suffering with a lot of the illnesses that are involved, I mean, we have people here. I know people who are getting nosebleeds. This is something I've talked to a lot of people who are having as well. I have a relative who visited a very heavily sprayed area from an area where they lived, which wasn't so heavily sprayed. After a few days in the heavily sprayed area, they started having nosebleeds. These things are not only showing outward symptoms, but the long-term damage that is being done to our bodies is unbelievable. And we already know, this is accepted science, that when you breathe in particulates, the more numerous those particulates and the smaller in size, the more they shorten your lifespan. So how many years have we already lost off of our lives because of this?
But with all this taken into account, and a lot of people, their first instinct is to shut down. And I would encourage people to look at this through a completely different lens. if you know the current direction will lead to a certain trip off the end of the plank, that's where we're at right now, on the end of the plank. What do you have to lose by turning without fear and facing this issue head on? Make your voice heard no matter what resistance you get, again, from family, from friends, from anybody. If you banish the black cloud above your head and accept what's happening, because we will accept reality. Every one of us, we can accept it well or we can accept it poorly. So why not accept it and embrace it and make the most of it? The only thing any of us own is our will, and to use that correctly is our only responsibility. And I think this comes down to philosophy. Do not shut down. Do not sit the bench in despair. Stand up while you can. Stand up while you can. We need everybody, again, in this battle. We have the tools we need. We still have an internet. We can do so much good. And if we could, again, expose this one issue, if we can just put a crack in the dam, the dominoes will start to fall in the power structure, and they know it. They know it. And that's why they're fighting so hard against what we're doing. That's why National Geographic, for those that haven't seen it, that's why National Geographic is now being used as a tool of disinformation for the power structure. For anybody who saw that, their whole expose on the, quote, condensation trails, they did also state, correctly so, that these trails, which we know to be particulate trails, are making the planet warmer overall, not colder. And this is exactly the position that I felt the data has always supported. It's what we've always stated. They can create large-scale temporary cool downs, as they're doing again and again and again on the U.S. East Coast. I want to remind everybody that the U.S. East Coast, the eastern half of the lower 48, was the most anomalously cold place consistently through the entire 2014 year on the entire planet Earth. That's not an accident. That's a direct result of climate engineering. So those that are in those areas that are ranting global cooling, you are selling climate engineering when you do that. You are saying exactly what the power structure wants you to say, and that's exactly why they keep hitting the same areas, the most populated areas, the greatest population density in the whole lower 48. That's what they want you to say. So if you want to help sell geoengineering, keep saying that. If you don't, look at the bigger picture and understand that what they're doing, creating these colder, temporary situations, it's coming at the cost of a worsened overall warming, and that's exactly what National Geographic has said. So I believe people within these publications, although they're being forced to put out certain messages, they are also starting to become very fearful of what they're participating in. And we need to continue to comment on their blogs, send email messages to them wherever we can find contacts, and to continue to rattle their cages constantly.
Absolutely. Dane, we have a statement, question kind of statement from the chat room in case I wanted to bring this to you. It said, Dane Russ, I believe that in everything that you do, all your efforts are wonderful and commendable. The problem is the majority of people who are in the not know, they do not know anything because they are not going to sites like this one that we are on now. People only listen to TV. I'm stunned at how many people do not know anything about what we are discussing. I believe in spreading the news like they are spreading the chemicals. We need to have a steady flow of constant information. I believe that little groups of folks need to spread out, and goes on with some other great suggestions. What do you think about getting the word out?
Well, that's absolutely true. But again, let's look at a mathematical paradigm with that. We've said this before as well, but it's important to consider. If one person effectively and credibly passes on data to two more at the beginning of a 30-day month, and those two to two each the second day, and so on throughout that month, that's 5.5 million. And I encourage people to do that on a calculator, because most won't believe that's the case. If you double from starting from 1 and you double that every day for 30 days, how could it possibly be 5.5 million? People really doubt that. Do it on a calculator, and you'll find out what I'm saying is exactly true.
Well, Einstein actually talked about compound the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. It's almost like compounding interest. Exactly what you're saying is true.
It is. And planting those seeds is very important. And also, this is important. When you have a particularly obstinate individual that obviously does not want to wake up, quit wasting your time. Quit wasting your time with people like that. Plant the seed and move on. You can't make the seed grow. It's not ready to grow. It's not going to grow. Shake the dust off your sandals and walk on, because there's plenty of people that are waiting to wake up, ready to wake up. I get comments from them a lot now, more so all the time. People who are immediately willing to join this fight. They see it. They've taken their blinders off, and that's the kind of people we need to reach.
Yeah,
That's
and there
where
are people that when you tell them the first time, I get a lot of reports from people, there are people who just outwardly reject it, ignore it, don't want to hear it, but there's also a significant percentage of the population who actually will respond in a very positive way. And I actually talked to the woman who was cutting my hair the other day about this, and she was astonished because she finally ended up telling me, my mother's been telling me about this, and we just thought she was crazy. And I said, no, she's not crazy. She's exactly right. This really is taking place.
That's what needs to happen, and also having something to pass on. Again, that's incredibly important. If you can pass on a credible bit of information, make copies of a good article, or again the informational flyers people can download for free off GeoEngineering Watch. I think they're on your site too, Russ. And having something to pass on lends immediate credibility, and also allows you to not have to go into too much of a rant, because when you pin people down with a diatribe, their defenses go up. They're not going to hear a thing you say. So refine your methods of communication. This is important to plant seeds as well.
We've been having a lot of snow anomalies too. We're collecting pictures of snow anomalies, and we're having both snowflakes that are like a centimeter in size. They're like little six-pointed stars like you would expect a snowflake, but they're like a centimeter in size, and they're perfectly shaped. Very, very strange. We have a bunch of people sending us pictures like that. We also have sheets, snow that is falling off the roof, falling off of people's cars, off their grills, in sheets. It kind of rolls together and sticks like a sheet. Something like, I'm not a young man anymore. I've never seen or heard of anything like this ever in my life.
Well, what do you see the mainstream disinformation machine do? They immediately try to explain away the incredibly strange-looking little star flakes. I've never seen anything like that before. And when they chemically nucleate, what we get? We get ice balls in Lake Michigan with 40-degree water. Again, God knows what they're seeding with at any particular point in time now, because they're very desperate. The heating up is occurring very rapidly. And again, we have probably hydrogen sulfide now in infiltrating certain areas. We had that in Seattle at the beginning of January. People smelled this rotten egg smell. That's indicative of hydrogen sulfide, H2S. And so we would expect that to start infiltrating areas where some of the fish die-offs occurred. People smelled the same smell. Hydrogen sulfide is heavier than air, sits on the surface. It's very deadly in small quantities even. So we see the fish kills, and as methane, CH4, releases from the seabed, and it is in massive quantities, we can expect hydrogen sulfide as well. And again, the ramifications of this are huge. If you have enough hydrogen sulfide pooling and pocketing in areas, and there's a source of ignition, we're talking about truly an apocalyptic scenario. Even lightning strikes can be a source of ignition if enough accumulates. So we're in uncharted territory. And again, it's imperative that we stop the climate engineering and allow the planet to respond on its own. And industrialized destruction of the planet, that's also a factor. Again, I can't stress that enough. Too many people are just trying desperately to make it a this or that equation. That's a sort of dichotomous thinking that needs to go out the window. It's not this or that. It's this, that, and a lot of other things.
Dane, a couple things. I have a news story posted on our site that actually talks about, it's actually a mainstream news story about people over a several dozen mile square area who were smelling the sulfur smell. And they weren't too far from the ocean. And they said that this was the cover story. And the cover stories are so bad. And I actually think the badness of the cover stories adds to people accepting them, because people think, well, I must be missing something. How could they say something so stupid? They were saying that there was a sewer line that ran off the coast that was leaking. And so, and they were saying this is just normal leakage. There's just normal bubbles that might come up. This is what they were saying in the mainstream news story. This wasn't that long ago.
That's what they're paid to do. That's what all the agencies are paid to do. It's normal to have aluminum in our rain. It's normal to have hydrogen sulfide floating around, or to smell this smell, or for the fish to die off. Now we're told the salmon in California are done. They're done. I mean, this is maybe the last year we'll see any salmon. They can't even get any, even though they're in hatcheries producing tens of millions of eggs. Nothing's going to survive. Water's too warm. Oxygen content is dropping.
And the idea is to keep the public comfortable as long as possible in ignorance, so this stuff can be maximally to its worst possible state before anybody responds. That's what it seems like they're doing.
Well, they're digging in.
Yeah.
They're digging in. They're preparing for total collapse and trying to keep the population entertained with football games and so forth. And the amount of security, by the way, for those that don't know, over Phoenix is truly astounding, including, I believe, 5 F-16s flying that area. Black Hawk helicopters, thousands of security personnel, literally thousands. Getting some weird noises on my end, the old pickup that I usually get. It sounds like someone's tapping into the line. I hope someone's listening. But yeah, it looks like they're preparing for a war zone in Phoenix for tomorrow. So again, it's this ramped up security state that to try to terrorize the population or cast this fear into them from organizations that have been spawned, armed, and perpetuated by our own government.
Absolutely. My apologies to people who are trying to call in. I'm getting some feedback on the chat that the call-in numbers are saying that the person is not available. I did double check, and everything is set correctly. I checked a little while ago, and so unfortunately, I'm not sure.
Something's probably wrong there. That's Rescue. I just sent you a message on that as well.
Yeah, not really sure what's going on. But nevertheless, we do have a couple of statements from the chat. So people, if you want to put the questions in the chat, I'll read them online. Somebody's saying, we've been experiencing extremely sore bones and joint discomfort after every snowfall, and it's not from shoveling. Wherever it is, it's in the precipitation, and it's mixed thoroughly in southern Ontario on days that the sky is clear enough and blatantly heavy. This is one thing that I experienced too. I want to let people know that you will see patterns that during or an hour, a few hours before incoming snowfalls, watch the patterns. For you who are more sensitive, you'll start having the pain, and you'll start seeing the patterns that it correlates with these incoming storms. I have this like clockwork, and more people are reporting to me the same. Dane?
Well, I mean, certainly we don't know what's in the mix at any given point in time, and I want to stress this as well. As I've stated before, we're talking about a very shallow layer of cold that is creating these headlines. And we have some people near Boulder that have reported 25, 30 degree temperature drops as they go down the mountain into the valley area of Boulder, only a few hundred feet in elevation, but a 25, 30 degree temperature drop as they go down. Snow no longer has anything to do with elevation with any of these storms. Nobody seems to remember that there used to be snow levels. Snow level at such and such elevation. No more. No more. And the atmosphere is being stratified. Again, as they put this cap on convection, this toxic particulate cap, it alters convection radically. The atmosphere stratifies. Thus, we have clouds like undulatus apparatus, only named in 2008. We have these cold layers on the ground that radically dissipate as soon as the front moves through, as soon as the sun comes out. People are getting sunburnt again in the middle of winter. I remember a winter solstice here only a month and a half ago. It was uncomfortable in the sun in Northern California. That's how intense the sunlight was. So what's this summer going to be like? And they're painting us further and further into a corner. And again, I stress, anybody who thinks that the power structure really has this all figured out, that they're carrying out an agenda exactly like they wanted it to go, I argue that. I completely argue that. They are sinking the entire ship, and they're on it. All data supports that right now on this path, if we do not alter direction completely, it's the end of the road. It's that simple, and I mean in the near term. So again,
absolutely,
it doesn't have to end this way, and we have a chance to take a giant leap in the right direction if people would simply join us in this fight. Don't just go on the blogs and comment. You have to reach the non-choir. You have to plant seeds elsewhere. But send out credible data. Don't send out these completely alarming statements or rants, or send something credible. Understand you can't plant the whole oak tree. You can't shove an oak tree down someone's throat. They're going to gag it back up. You have to plant a seed and do it in a credible manner. And that's why the Flaming Arrows link on geoengineeringwatch.org, in the upper left corner, we have the activist suggestions link and the Flaming Arrow link. And there's a letter that's very thought out so that it introduces the issue in a manner that will not cause people to vomit it back up because it's too big of a meal. So people can sow seeds, and they should be sowing seeds. It's good to look at the blogs. The blogs are important. There's 100 people who look silently at what's being stated for every one that comments, maybe more than 100 that look silently. And that's why it's important also on these blogs to put correct data, not just an informational free-for-all, because that doesn't help people get their compass heading. It does not help. And so when people send in comments that are not supported by data in any way, shape, or form, and they get angry because I won't post that, I'm sorry, but if I'm to have any purpose, if our site is to have any purpose, it's to post data that's statistically sound. If there's a legitimate question about something, I try to answer it as much as I can. But the bottom line is, as much as time allows, the bottom line is, though, many people need to do some investigating before they start asking questions and expecting everybody to stop and do personal tutorials. Investigate first. If you still have legitimate questions, all of us will try to answer that. But you must investigate first. You can't just send a list of 20 questions because you didn't take the time to do any investigation. So
very good.
Important for people to look. Go ahead, Russ.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a Skype caller, which I'll get to in just a second. A couple statements from the chat room, which I'll read real quick since our phones seem to be not working at the moment. Somebody's stating that they get 40 to 50 degree temperature swings now for the last couple of years, and this person is only 300 feet above sea level. Another person writes, indeed, after thick spraying, I get cracking joints, fibromyalgia type of pain in my neck and back, down to my feet. Another one says they have strange spider webs appearing, gray-blue-like substance, very strange. And here's the interesting part of the statement: makes your lungs hurt in your back. Now, this is one of the symptoms I have when this type of stuff is in the air, is that my lungs hurt and it goes all the way through to my back. It's very interesting that that person says that. So I'm hearing more and more of this.
A lot of things are happening, certainly. We can't possibly define them all on the color of substances people are seeing. I've shared once before that on a sabbatical out into the trailless wilderness around my home, in streams that are, completely remote, after an ice-nucleated snowstorm, I found pockets and eddies in some of these streams that had a layer of blue sediment there. And I've been in the forest my whole life. I've never seen anything like this, and it appears to be a part of the nucleating material. So, again, we can't know the full extent of what they're spraying on us, but we know enough. We know enough. It's lethal.
Well, we know it
lethal.
certainly causes bad symptoms. I can attest to that. And many people have contacted me, and I've seen everything from rainbow, looks like oily substances on the car hoods and on their windshields, all kinds of weird anomalies like this appearing after rainfall. We have a question. Somebody wanted to ask Dane, notice that the fir trees are dying faster than the rest of the trees. Is there a reason why they're more vulnerable? I live in Washington.
I believe there is. Fir trees, there's a number of reasons, but fir trees require different conditions than some other conifers, like pines. The pines are more resilient, be it a ponderosa, sugar pine. In Northern California, we have gray pines that are quite resilient. Fir trees respirate more through their foliage, and they're also more susceptible to different types of beetles, like Ips beetles, for example, and their root systems may, in fact, be more susceptible as well. Bioavailable metals, like aluminum, have different effects on different organisms, and they seem to have a much greater effect on the fir trees, and I believe the UV has a greater effect on the fir trees as well. So the fir trees are just more susceptible in many ways, and the redwoods, which respirate in a manner similar to the firs, like a Douglas fir, are deteriorating rapidly as well, very rapidly. It's astounding that nobody talks about this. In fact, I spoke face-to-face with U.S. Forest Service personnel in the redwood area, and I asked if they were monitoring the tree decline. And she looked at me with the deer in the headlights look and said, "We don't see any tree decline." This is astounding. Some of the redwoods have half the foliage that they had only a few years ago. I can see it. I've shared before. My dad was an arborist, and this has been something I've been around my entire life. And the forest floor is covered with dropping foliage. You can see right through the canopy everywhere. But like we discussed earlier, their job is to say everything's normal. Right up to the point in time, I guess our heads are on fire, they will say it's all normal. So again, it's up to the population. Everybody listening has to actually act. Make it your mission every day. Make it your mission to figure out where you have not put a dent in the armor. That's what I do every morning. What stone haven't I overturned? Who haven't I reached out to? Where can I fire another arrow where there might be an opening in the armor? You know, that's what I think about. For any that have seen the Hobbit movie, I think it was one of the last Hobbit movies, the big dragon Smaug has one hole. He's missing a scale. It's the only place he can be hurt, but he's missing a scale in that spot, and he's vulnerable there. We all need to think in those terms. There are vulnerable areas in the power structure where we can get information out. We have to think like that. And all it's going to take is one crack in the dam, and the dam will blow. Wait and see, and the power structure knows it, and they're running out of fingers and toes to plug the leaks in the dam because there are many leaks in the dam already, I can guarantee you. People are waking up fast.
Plus, their minions are being sprayed too, and they need to know that.
They are. Those who think they're on the inside, those who think that their pensions and their paychecks are going to save them, are starting to realize not going to matter a bit, not a bit. And I don't mean it's not going to matter in 20 years or 10 years. It's not going to matter in 1 year, probably, in the course we're on. And we need to wake them up to that fact and say it confidently, that all the things they think will save them will not. If they care about anything, if they care about their kids, if they care about any chance of a future for their kids, they have to face this issue. If they have any semblance of honor or virtue left, they must wake up. Polish your message, learn how to deliver it, and continue sowing seeds. Period.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sorry about the phones being out today. Nevertheless, we do have a record number of listeners today. Let me read one quick statement from the forum, and then let's bring our caller in for a couple minutes. Trees here last year, talking about southern Ontario. Trees here last year, especially the evergreens, were literally burnt. All the pine needles were burnt and brown on the south side of the trees only. And this wasn't a local phenomenon. I traveled over southern Ontario, hundreds of kilometers. It was the same everywhere after the snow melted. There was gray web material all over the grass. I'm literally out on the shores of Lake Huron, so not tons of industry nearby. So another strange phenomenon. And I guess on that note, we just have a couple minutes left. Kim, are you on the line with us?
Hi, everybody. How are you all this afternoon?
Good, Kim. Hi,
Kim.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
I've been really interested in the weather that we've been getting because I'm in northern New England, and I like to keep track of the weather because I do spend a lot of time outside, so I need to know what's going to happen, how much time do I have, and the arrival of the storms, the size of the storms, the shape of the storms, and I saved satellite images, and I've looked back all the way until November 4th, and I've saved some satellite images that show the same type of storm systems showing up at the same time in the same locations every single month for the past 3 months.
It goes back even further. Kim. And again, it's showing up because they're all engineered. And I sent you a map, Russ. I hope you can post. It's the latest NOAA map, which is nothing more than the scheduled weather. NOAA is simply a branch of Raytheon, private defense contractor Raytheon. So this is a completely engineered scenario. They fry the west to cool the east because this is a psychological operation. That's all there is to it. And it works for a lot of people because mentally, psychologically, a lot of people cannot imagine the world could be any different than what it is outside their doorstep. And the power structure knows this. So I encourage people, again, look at some of those maps, look at some of the data. I don't just say it, I try to post the maps. So please research. Everyone needs to research. Help us sound the alarm.
Very good. Kim, thank you for calling in. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of Dane Wigington and GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We're here every Saturday at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on UCY.TV. Join us next week. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Easy Skateboard